remember the exact moment my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. It wasn't when I found the lipstick stain on his collar, or when I discovered the secret text messages. It wasn't even when I walked in on them together in our bed, the bed we'd picked out together at that little furniture store downtown, the one with the saleswoman who kept calling us lovebirds. No, my heart truly broke when Daniel looked me straight in the eyes, his expression colder than I'd ever seen it, and said those 7 words that would haunt me for months. "No one will ever love you." He laughed. It was the laugh that did it. The casual cruelty, the dismissive flick of his wrist as he gestured toward the door. 5 years together, dissolved in a moment of such callousness that I couldn't breathe. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Olivia Bennett, and this is the story of how I went from being completely destroyed by the man I thought I'd marry to standing triumphantly at the back of a church 2 years later, watching his face crumble as I walked in with the most incredible man I'd ever met. This isn't just a revenge story. It's a story about rebuilding yourself from nothing, about finding your worth when someone tries to convince you that you have none. And yes, it's about the sweetest revenge I could have possibly imagined. Let me take you back to where it all began. Daniel and I met during our sophomore year of college. I was studying English literature with dreams of becoming an editor, and he was the charismatic business major everyone wanted to know. We ran into each other at a mutual friend's party, and I was immediately captivated by his confidence and the way his eyes seemed to light up when he talked about his ambitions. "I'm going to run my own company by 30. He told me that night, his arm casually draped around my shoulders as if we'd known each other forever. Build something from nothing, change the world. I believed him. God, I believed everything. We became inseparable. Daniel was charming, driven, and seemed to adore me. He'd leave little notes in my textbooks, surprise me with coffee during late-night study sessions, and tell me I was the one person who truly understood him. When my parents expressed concerns that he seemed a bit too focused on himself, I defended him fiercely. They just didn't see what I saw. After graduation, we moved in together. I got a job at a small publishing house, and he started working for a tech startup. The early days of our cohabitation were blissful, cooking dinner together, christening every room of our apartment, staying up late talking about our dreams. I thought we were building something unbreakable. The changes were subtle at first. Daniel started coming home later. He became irritable when I asked about his day. The sweet gestures that had once been commonplace, the random flowers, the surprise date nights, slowly disappeared. I told myself it was normal, just the reality of 2 busy professionals adjusting to the real world. "You worry too much," he'd say whenever I tried to talk about the distance I felt growing between us. "Everything's fine. I'm just stressed about work." I believed him. I always believed him. Then came the business trips. More frequent, longer durations. His texts became sporadic, his calls hurried. But still, I made excuses for him. I was the understanding girlfriend, the supportive partner who knew that success required sacrifice. "I'm building this for us," he'd say after returning from a week-long absence, bringing me some generic souvenir from whatever city he'd been in, for our future. The night everything fell apart was a Friday in late October. Daniel had been away in Chicago for 3 days, and I'd planned a special welcome-home dinner. I'd left work early, spent hours cooking his favorite meal, and even bought new lingerie for later. I wanted to reconnect, to close the chasm that had been widening between us. I wasn't supposed to find anything. I was just looking for the corkscrew in his travel bag when my fingers brushed against something small and velvet. My heart leapt. Was it a ring box? After 5 years, was he finally going to propose? What I pulled out wasn't a ring box, but a woman's earring, expensive looking, with a distinct design I'd never seen before. My stomach twisted as I set it aside, telling myself there must be a reasonable explanation. Then I saw his phone light up on the counter, a notification from someone named Melissa, with a heart emoji next to her name. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again soon?" I stood frozen, the earring clutched in my palm, as 5 years of trust began to unravel. I don't know how long I waited there in our kitchen, surrounded by the romantic dinner I'd prepared, the candles slowly burning down. 2 hours, maybe 3. I just sat at our dining table, the earring placed neatly beside his plate, his unlocked phone with Melissa's messages open right next to it. When Daniel finally walked through the door around midnight, he didn't immediately notice anything wrong. He dropped his bags in the entryway, called out a casual, "Liv, I'm home," and walked into the kitchen. He stopped short when he saw me sitting there in the dim candlelight, my makeup streaked from hours of crying. "What's all this?" he asked, gesturing to the cold food on the table. His tone was annoyed, as if I'd inconvenienced him somehow. I didn't speak. I just pointed to the earring and the phone. His face changed then, not with shame or regret, but with something like relief, as if he was glad to finally be caught, to be freed from the burden of pretending. "How long?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "Does it matter?" He shrugged, loosening his tie and walking to the fridge to grab a beer. The casualness of it was like a knife to my chest. "Of course it matters." 5 years, Daniel. 5 years of my life I gave you." He took a long swig of his beer, leaning against the counter with an expression of bored indifference. "It's been on and off for about a year. Melissa works in the Chicago office. A year. While I had been planning our future, waiting for a proposal, supporting his dreams, he had been building a relationship with someone else. Why? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. Why not just end things with me if you wanted her? That's when he laughed. It was a sound I'll never forget. Hollow, cruel, amused at my pain. "Because you were convenient, Olivia. You were here taking care of the apartment, being supportive. Melissa is exciting. She challenges me. She's going places." I stood up then, anger finally breaking through the shock. "And I'm not? I've been building my career too, Daniel. I've been working just as hard." "Come on," he interrupted, rolling his eyes. "Editing books? That's not a real career. Melissa's in finance. She understands my world." "Get out," I said, my voice shaking. "Pack your things and get out." He set his beer down with exaggerated care. "This is my apartment too, Olivia. I pay more than half the rent, if you recall." "I don't care." I can't look at you right now. Just go." Instead of leaving, he stepped closer to me, his eyes cold. "You know what your problem is? You live in a fantasy world. You actually thought we were heading toward marriage, didn't you?" He laughed again, that same horrible sound. "No one will ever love you like that, Olivia. You're too needy, too boring, too ordinary." I felt something break inside me then, some fundamental belief in my own worth. 5 years of subtle put-downs, of making me feel lucky to be with him, culminating in this moment of utter cruelty. Through my tears, I managed to say, "You need to leave, now." Surprisingly, he complied. "Fine, I'll get some things and stay at Melissa's. She's been wanting me to move in anyway." He smirked. "I'll come back for the rest of my stuff later." I sat motionless as he packed a bag, as he grabbed his keys, as he walked toward the door. Just before leaving, he turned back. "You should thank me, you know. I wasted 5 years with you. At least now you can find someone more suitable, someone with lower expectations." The door closed behind him with a soft click, and I was alone. The days that followed exist in my memory as a blur of tissues, unanswered phone calls from concerned friends, and the constant replay of his words in my head. "No one will ever love you." I called in sick to work, unable to face people, to pretend I was okay when I was anything but. My best friend Zoe finally used her spare key to get into my apartment after I'd ignored her texts for 3 days straight. She found me curled up on the couch, surrounded by takeout containers, still wearing the same pajamas I'd put on after Daniel left. "Oh, honey," she said, sitting beside me and pulling me into a hug. "Why didn't you call me?" I buried my face in her shoulder and sobbed. "I feel so stupid, Zoe. So completely stupid." She stroked my hair as I told her everything, the earring, the texts, Daniel's cruel words. When I finished, her face was a mask of barely contained fury. "That absolute bastard," she hissed. "I always knew he was self-centered, but this is beyond." "He was right, though," I whispered. "I was living in a fantasy. I thought we were building a life together, but I was just convenient." Zoe grabbed me by the shoulders, forcing me to look at her. "Listen to me, Olivia Bennett. That man is a narcissistic piece of garbage, and nothing he said to you is true. You are kind and smart and beautiful, and any person would be lucky to have you in their life." I wanted to believe her. I desperately wanted to believe her. But Daniel's words had taken root, blooming like poisonous flowers in my mind. Zoe stayed with me that night, helping me clean up the apartment and making me eat some actual food. Before she left the next morning, she made me promise 2 things: that I would go back to work on Monday, and that I would call her if I started feeling overwhelmed again. I kept both promises, though returning to work was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Every sympathetic glance from a coworker who'd heard about the breakup felt like pity. Every casual question about how I was doing felt like an interrogation. But I went through the motions, editing manuscripts with mechanical precision, attending meetings without really being present. 2 weeks after Daniel moved out, he came back for his things. I made sure to be at Zoe's apartment when he did it, leaving him a note with instructions to leave his key on the counter. It was cowardly, perhaps, but I couldn't bear to see him again, to risk hearing more of his cutting remarks. That night, alone in an apartment that now felt too big, too empty, I allowed myself to really feel the anger that had been building beneath the sadness. Anger at Daniel for his betrayal, yes, but also anger at myself for not seeing the signs, for making excuses for his behavior, for diminishing myself to accommodate his ego. I pulled out a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion and poured myself a large glass. Then I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager. I started a journal. The words poured out of me, raw and unfiltered, all the things I wished I'd said to Daniel, all the ways I wanted to make him hurt like he'd hurt me. I want him to know what it feels like, I wrote, the wine making my handwriting sloppier than usual. To be humiliated, to have someone laugh at your pain, to realize that everything you thought was real was a lie. I fell asleep on the couch that night, the journal open beside me, tear stains smudging the ink. When I woke the next morning, head pounding from too much wine, I read what I'd written and felt a strange mix of shame and resolve. Revenge fantasies were normal after a betrayal, right? It didn't mean I would actually do anything. But the seed had been planted. Weeks passed, then months. I threw myself into work, taking on additional projects, staying late at the office. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during my relationship with Daniel. I joined a gym, not with the goal of getting my body back, or whatever nonsense women's magazines suggest after a breakup, but because the physical exertion helped quiet my mind. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, I started to feel like myself again. Not the person I was with Daniel, I realized I'd never be her again, but someone new, someone stronger, more cautious perhaps, but also more self-aware. 6 months after the breakup, I was having coffee with Zoe when she asked if I'd heard the news. "What news?" I asked, stirring my latte absently. She hesitated, which immediately put me on alert. Zoe never hesitated. "Just tell me," I said, bracing myself. "Daniel and Melissa are engaged. He posted about it on Instagram yesterday. Some big proposal in Paris." I felt a sharp pain in my chest, like someone had grabbed my heart and squeezed. "Paris," I whispered. "We always talked about going to Paris together." Zoe reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Liv. I debated whether to tell you, but I thought you'd rather hear it from me than stumble across it online." I nodded, trying to process this new information. After a moment, I took a deep breath and asked, "When's the wedding?" According to his post, they're planning for next May, about a year from now. A year. In a year, Daniel would be standing at an altar, promising forever to a woman who wasn't me, a woman he'd chosen over me, a woman he thought was worthy of the commitment he'd never been willing to give me. "Are you okay?" Zoe asked, watching me carefully. I wasn't okay. I was furious. All the progress I'd made, all the healing seemed to evaporate in an instant. The unfairness of it burned inside me, that he could betray me, humiliate me, tell me I was unlovable, and then get his happily ever after while I was still picking up the pieces. But I forced a smile. "I'm fine. It's been 6 months, right? I'm over him." Zoe clearly didn't believe me, but she didn't push. That night, I pulled out the journal I hadn't touched since that first drunken entry. I flipped through pages of anger and hurt until I reached a blank page. Then I began to write again, but this time it wasn't just emotional venting. This time, I was making a plan. "Daniel Collins thinks he's won," I wrote. "He thinks he can discard me like I meant nothing and go on to have the perfect life with his perfect fiancé. He probably never thinks about me at all anymore. But I want him to think about me. I want him to remember. I want him to know that what he did has consequences." I paused, pen hovering over the paper. What exactly did I want? To ruin his relationship with Melissa? To publicly humiliate him? To make him regret ever meeting me? All of the above, a small voice whispered in my head. But how? I wasn't some criminal mastermind. I wasn't even particularly vengeful by nature. Before Daniel, I'd never wanted to hurt anyone deliberately. I closed the journal, suddenly ashamed of my dark thoughts. This wasn't me. I didn't want to become bitter and consumed by revenge. I wanted to move on, to be happy again someday. The next morning, I called my therapist, the one I'd started seeing a month after the breakup, and scheduled an emergency session. I needed to process this news properly, not spiral into fantasies of revenge. "Doctor." Winters listened patiently as I poured out my feelings about Daniel's engagement. When I finished, she leaned forward slightly. "Olivia, your reaction is completely normal. Finding out an ex has moved on, especially one who hurt you so deeply, often reactivates our pain. But I'm concerned about these revenge thoughts. They're keeping you connected to Daniel and the hurt he caused. They're keeping you stuck. I knew she was right. Logically, I knew she was right. But emotionally? Emotionally, the thought of Daniel getting everything he wanted while I was still struggling to believe I was worthy of love felt unbearable. How do I let go? I asked, my voice small. How do I stop caring what happens to him? By focusing on your own life. By building something so fulfilling that Daniel becomes irrelevant. The best revenge, as they say, is living well. Living well? Such a simple concept, yet it felt impossible in that moment. How could I live well when a part of me was still defined by his rejection? But I promised Dr. Winters I would try. I would focus on my own happiness, not on hurting Daniel. I would work on truly believing that his words that night weren't true, that I was worthy of love. And for a while I did try. I threw myself even harder into work, earning a promotion to senior editor. I traveled, taking the solo trip to Italy I'd always wanted, but had put off because Daniel wasn't interested. I dated casually, though nothing serious. I wasn't ready for that yet. From the outside, it probably looked like I was thriving. Moving on, living well, just as Dr. Winters had suggested. But inside, there was still a part of me that couldn't let go. A part that checked Daniel's social media accounts late at night, that felt a twisted satisfaction when I saw comments suggesting Melissa might be too controlling, that fantasized about ways to show him how wrong he'd been about me. It wasn't healthy, and I knew it, but I couldn't seem to stop myself. 8 months after our breakup, almost 2 months after learning of his engagement, I was at a publishing industry cocktail party when my life took another unexpected turn. I was standing alone near the bar, scanning the room for anyone I knew well enough to comfortably approach, when someone bumped into me from behind, causing my wine to slosh dangerously close to the rim of my glass. "I am so sorry," a deep voice said, and I turned to find myself looking up at one of the most attractive men I'd ever seen. Tall, with warm brown eyes and the kind of smile that made you want to smile back, he looked genuinely apologetic for the near spill. "No harm done," I said, straightening my posture automatically. "Glass is still full. Thank goodness for that. Wasting good wine would have been a tragedy." He extended his hand. "I'm Ethan Reed. Olivia Bennett," I replied, taking his hand. His grip was firm but not too tight, his palm warm against mine. "Olivia Bennett from North Star Publishing?" he asked, recognition lighting his eyes. I nodded, a bit surprised. "Yes, I'm a senior editor there. Do we know each other?" He laughed, a genuine sound that made something loosen in my chest. "Not yet, but I've heard great things about your work. I'm with Hayes Literary Agency. I believe you're working with one of our authors, Sarah Chen?" "Oh, yes, her novel is incredible. One of the best manuscripts I've seen this year." I knew she was in good hands. Ethan said, his smile widening. "Sarah speaks very highly of you." We fell into easy conversation after that, discussing Sarah's book, then other books we loved, then the state of publishing in general. It was the most engaged I'd felt in a social situation since before the breakup. Ethan was intelligent, witty, and listened to my opinions with genuine interest. When the party began to wind down, he asked if I'd like to continue our conversation over coffee sometime. I hesitated only briefly before saying yes and giving him my number. It was just coffee after all. Professional networking. It didn't have to be anything more. But as I left the party that night, I couldn't ignore the slight flutter in my stomach, the way my cheeks hurt from smiling more than they had in months. It was a feeling I'd almost forgotten. Possibility. Ethan texted the next day to set up our coffee date, and we met that weekend at a small cafe near my apartment. What I'd intended to be a brief, casual meeting turned into a 3-hour conversation that flowed so naturally, it felt like we'd known each other for years. I learned that Ethan had grown up in Seattle, had studied literature and business at NYU, and had fallen into literary agenting almost by accident after initially planning to go into publishing like me. He loved hiking, played amateur basketball in a city league, and had an elderly golden retriever named Hemingway. "Very literary of you," I teased when he showed me a picture of the dog, a sweet-faced senior with a graying muzzle. I'd love to take credit for being cleverly on brand, but I adopted him when he was already named, Ethan admitted with a laugh. It felt like fate, though. A literary agent with a dog named Hemingway. When we finally left the cafe, Ethan walked me home, keeping a respectful distance but maintaining that easy conversation. At my building, he turned to face me. "I've really enjoyed talking with you, Olivia." he said, sincerity evident in his voice. Would you like to have dinner sometime? An actual date, not just professional networking over coffee. The word date sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I hadn't been on a real date since Daniel. The thought was both exciting and terrifying. I should probably tell you, I said slowly. I got out of a long-term relationship about 8 months ago. It didn't end well and I'm still processing, I guess. Ethan nodded, his expression understanding rather than put off. I appreciate you telling me. For what it's worth, I'm not looking to rush into anything serious right away either. But I really like talking to you, and I'd like to get to know you better. No pressure, though. Take all the time you need to think about it. His consideration, so different from the impatience Daniel would have shown, made my decision easier. Dinner would be nice, I said. Thank you for understanding. He smiled, that warm smile that reached his eyes. Great. I'll text you to set it up? I nodded, and after a brief, slightly awkward moment where it seemed like he might want to hug me but wasn't sure if he should, we said goodnight. As I watched him walk away, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. Not just for a potential relationship, it was far too soon to think about that, but hope that my heart wasn't as permanently damaged as I'd feared, that I could still connect with someone, still feel something positive. That night, I didn't check Daniel's social media. Instead, I found myself looking up Ethan online, smiling at his professional headshot on the Hayes Literary Agency website, reading his impressive bio. Our dinner date the following weekend went even better than coffee. Ethan took me to a small Italian restaurant where the owner knew him by name and insisted on bringing us special dishes that weren't on the menu. We talked for hours about books and travel and family, carefully avoiding the topic of past relationships. At the end of the night, when he walked me home again, there was another moment of hesitation outside my building. This time, I made the decision for both of us, stepping forward to give him a quick kiss on the cheek. I had a wonderful time, I said, pulling back to see surprise and pleasure in his expression. So did I, he replied softly. Can I call you tomorrow? I nodded, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the wine we'd had with dinner. I'd like that. What followed was the most careful, considerate courtship I could have imagined. Ethan never pushed, never assumed, always checked in with how I was feeling. We went on more dinner dates, to museums, to bookstores where we'd recommend titles to each other. I met Hemingway, who immediately won my heart by resting his graying head on my lap and gazing up at me with soulful eyes. Slowly, cautiously, I began to open up to Ethan about what had happened with Daniel. Not all at once, but in pieces, testing his reaction each time. And each time he listened without judgment, offering comfort without platitudes. He was wrong, you know, Ethan said one night, after I'd shared some of the crueler things Daniel had said during our breakup. We were sitting on his couch, Hemingway snoring softly at our feet, about no one ever loving you. That's the kind of thing someone says when they're trying to keep you down because they know you deserve better. I looked away, blinking back sudden tears. Logically, I know that. But emotionally, there are still days when I believe him. Ethan took my hand, his touch gentle. I understand. Healing isn't linear. But for what it's worth, I think you're extraordinary, Olivia Bennett. Anyone would be lucky to love you. 3 months into our relationship, after we'd finally moved beyond kissing to sleeping together, a milestone that took emotional preparation for me, I accidentally came across Daniel's social media again. I hadn't checked it in weeks, too caught up in my growing relationship with Ethan to waste energy on the past. But there it was, a photo of Daniel and Melissa at some engagement party, #Collins wedding, with a date set for May 15th of the following year. The wedding venue was tagged St. James Church downtown, with the reception at the Bellamy Hotel. An uncomfortable feeling settled in my stomach as I stared at the image. Daniel looked exactly the same, that confident smile I once found charming now seeming smug to my eyes. Melissa was beautiful in an obvious way, her engagement ring prominently displayed as she clutched Daniel's arm. I quickly closed the app, ashamed of having looked, of still caring enough to feel anything at all about Daniel's wedding plans. I had Ethan now. Kind, thoughtful, amazing Ethan who made me laugh and respected my boundaries and looked at me like I was something precious. But that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep beside me, I found myself thinking about Daniel's wedding. About him standing at that altar, smugly certain that he'd made the right choice, that Melissa was worth committing to while I had not been. about him never facing any consequences for the way he'd hurt me, the things he'd said to me. The revenge fantasies I thought I'd left behind came flooding back. Only this time they weren't vague notions of making him pay somehow. This time they were specific. I imagined walking into that church on his wedding day, not to object dramatically or cause a scene, but just to be seen. To be seen with Ethan by my side, happy and whole and loved, living proof that Daniel had been wrong about me. The thought was intoxicating. For the first time, I allowed myself to fully embrace the idea of revenge, not as something destructive, but as something healing. A way to reclaim the narrative, to write the final chapter of our story on my terms. The next morning, I woke with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. I reached for my journal, the one I'd abandoned when I started seeing Ethan, and began to write. May 15th, I wrote, St. James Church. The day I show Daniel Collins that not only can someone love me, but someone far better than him does. It was crazy, of course, completely inappropriate and potentially disastrous. I couldn't actually crash his wedding. Could I? As the weeks passed and my relationship with Ethan deepened, I kept the idea tucked away, neither fully committing to it nor dismissing it entirely. It became a sort of secret fantasy, something to turn over in my mind during quiet moments. Meanwhile, Ethan and I were falling in love. Neither of us had said the words yet, but I could feel it in the way he looked at me, in the small, thoughtful things he did. The way he remembered my coffee order, the books he thought I'd enjoy, the quiet support he offered when work was stressful. I felt it too, this growing, expanding feeling in my chest whenever he was near. It scared me, how much I was starting to need him, but it also exhilarated me. I was loving again, despite Daniel's prediction that no one would ever love me. 6 months into our relationship, Ethan took me to his family's lake house for a weekend getaway. It was there, sitting on the dock with our feet dangling in the cool water, that he first told me he loved me. I know it might be too soon, he said, his voice steady but his eyes revealing his nervousness. And you don't need to say it back if you're not ready. But I love you, Olivia. I think I've been falling in love with you since that first coffee date. The words hung between us, weightless and perfect. I felt tears prick my eyes, not from sadness or fear, but from a joy so intense it was almost painful. I love you too, I whispered, and it was like releasing a breath I'd been holding for a year. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. He kissed me then, a kiss full of promise and understanding, and I knew in that moment that what I had with Ethan was real, in a way my relationship with Daniel never had been. This was partnership, not convenience. This was seeing and being seen. That night, as Ethan slept peacefully beside me, I thought again about Daniel's wedding, now only 6 months away. The fantasy of walking into that church with Ethan by my side had not faded. If anything, it had grown stronger with the certainty of our love. But could I involve Ethan in something so vengeful? He knew about Daniel, about the breakup, but I'd never shared these lingering thoughts of revenge. Would he understand, or would he be disappointed in me? The answer came unexpectedly a month later. We were at my apartment cooking dinner together when Ethan asked about my plans for May. May? I repeated, my heart skipping a beat. Why? There's a literary conference in Boston I've been invited to speak at. It's the weekend of May 15th. I thought maybe you could come with me. Make a little vacation out of it. May 15th, Daniel's wedding date. The universe was giving me an out, a perfect reason to be far away from that church, to finally let go of my revenge fantasy. I should have said yes immediately, but instead I found myself hesitating, a lump forming in my throat. What is it? Ethan asked, noticing my expression. If that weekend doesn't work. No, it's not that, I said quickly. It's just, that's the date of Daniel's wedding. Ethan put down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables, turning to face me fully. Oh, and that bothers you? Not in the way you might think, I assured him, seeing the flash of concern in his eyes. I don't want to be with him. I want to be with you. Only you. But, he prompted gently. I took a deep breath, deciding to be completely honest. But I've had this fantasy, I guess, of showing up at his wedding, not to cause a scene or anything dramatic, just to be there with you, looking happy, to show him that he was wrong about me, that someone does love me. I expected confusion, maybe even disappointment from Ethan. Instead, after a moment of consideration, he started to laugh. You want to crash your ex's wedding to prove a point? That's actually kind of brilliant. I stared at him, not sure I'd heard correctly. You don't think it's petty or unhealthy? Ethan shrugged, his expression thoughtful. Normally I might, but given what this guy said to you, how he treated you, I think it's human. And sometimes closure comes in unexpected packages. So you'd consider doing it with me? I asked, hardly daring to hope. Absolutely, Ethan said without hesitation. If it's something you really want, if you think it will help you finally put this chapter behind you, I'm all in. I felt a rush of love for this man who understood me so completely, who didn't judge my lingering need for vindication. We wouldn't stay for the ceremony, I clarified. Just be seen arriving. Maybe say a brief congratulations. Nothing dramatic. Whatever you want, he agreed, though I reserve the right to accidentally spill a drink on him if he says anything remotely unkind to you. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. Deal. With Ethan's support, my vague fantasy began to transform into an actual plan. Not an elaborate scheme of humiliation, but something simpler, more dignified. We would attend the ceremony as guests. I knew the church was large enough that 2 more people wouldn't be noticed immediately. We would be seen by Daniel, and then we would leave before the reception. The goal wasn't to ruin his day, but to reclaim my narrative. To show him, and more importantly, to show myself, that his words that night had no power over me anymore. As May approached, I found myself thinking less and less about the wedding and more about my future with Ethan. We had started talking tentatively about moving in together when his lease was up in July. Hemingway had his own bed at my apartment now. We were building something real, something lasting. 3 weeks before Daniel's wedding, Ethan took me to dinner at the restaurant where we'd had our first date. The owner, Mario, greeted us warmly and led us to our table, the one in the corner with the best view of the garden patio. I have something to ask you, Ethan said after we'd ordered, reaching across the table to take my hand. My heart stuttered. Oh? I know we've talked about moving in together this summer, and I'm still completely on board with that. But I was thinking, what if we did something else first? Something else? I repeated, not following. Ethan took a deep breath, then reached into his pocket with his free hand. When he pulled out a small velvet box, I froze. Olivia Bennet, he said, his voice steady despite the nervous flutter of his pulse. I could feel where our hands were joined. This past year with you has been the best of my life. You are the strongest, most compassionate, most incredible person I've ever known. And if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my life showing you just how loved you truly are. He opened the box to reveal a beautiful ring, simple and elegant, with a center sapphire surrounded by small diamonds. Will you marry me? He asked. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Tears filled my eyes as I looked from the ring to Ethan's hopeful face. This moment, this perfect moment that I'd once dreamed of with Daniel, was now happening with the man who had shown me what real love looked like. Yes, I finally managed, my voice breaking on the word. Yes, of course I'll marry you. Ethan's smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto my finger, then leaned across the table to kiss me as Mario and his staff applauded from the sidelines. As we celebrated that night, surrounded by the glow of our new engagement, I thought briefly about Daniel's upcoming wedding. The revenge fantasy that had sustained me for so long suddenly seemed small and unnecessary in the face of this real, profound happiness. But when I mentioned to Ethan that perhaps we should reconsider our plan to attend, he surprised me. I think we should still go, he said, his arm around me as we walked home from the restaurant. Not for revenge anymore, but for closure. A symbolic end to that chapter of your life. I looked up at him, this wonderful man who somehow always knew what I needed. Are you sure? Completely sure. Besides, he added with a mischievous smile, now we have even more to celebrate. Imagine his face when he sees that ring on your finger. I laughed, leaning into his embrace. I love you, Ethan Reed. I love you too, future Mrs. Reed, or Bennett Reed, or whatever name you choose. The 2 weeks leading up to Daniel's wedding passed in a blur of engagement excitement. We told our families, celebrated with friends, and started talking about what kind of wedding we wanted. Through it all, the plan to attend Daniel's ceremony remained, though it had transformed from an act of revenge to something more like a ceremonial goodbye to my past. The morning of May 15th dawned clear and warm, a perfect spring day for a wedding. I stood in front of my closet, considering what to wear to the event that had loomed so large in my imagination for nearly a year. Finally, I selected a deep blue dress that matched my engagement ring, elegant but not overly formal. I wanted to look good, yes, but not like I was trying too hard. Ethan wore a charcoal gray suit that made him look even more handsome than usual, if that was possible. Ready for this? he asked as we stood in my apartment, preparing to leave for the church. I took a deep breath, checking my reflection one last time. I think so. Just stay close to me? Always, he promised, taking my hand and giving it a reassuring squeeze. The drive to St. James Church was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. As we pulled into the parking lot, I could see guests streaming in, all dressed in their wedding finery. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was this really a good idea? Was I truly doing this for closure, or was there still a part of me that wanted Daniel to hurt the way I had? We can still change our minds, Ethan said quietly, reading my expression. We can drive away right now, go get brunch, and never think about Daniel Collins again. I considered it, genuinely considered it. But then I thought about that night, about Daniel's cruel laugh as he told me no one would ever love me. About the months of depression that followed, the work it had taken to rebuild my sense of self-worth. No, I said firmly. I want to do this. Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. Then let's do it. We walked into the church together, my hand tucked securely in the crook of his arm, my engagement ring catching the light. No one questioned our presence. The church was large and full, the ushers too busy to ask for invitations. We took seats near the back, on the groom's side, but not prominently placed. I wanted Daniel to see us, but I didn't want to create a scene. This was about quiet vindication, not public humiliation. As the music began and the wedding party started to process in, I spotted Daniel at the altar. He looked much the same, though perhaps a bit heavier than when we were together. His best man was his brother Ryan, who had always been kind to me. Then, as Daniel turned slightly to watch Melissa's bridesmaids enter, his gaze swept over the congregation and locked directly on me. The moment our eyes met, I felt a strange sense of calm settle over me. There was shock in his expression, then confusion, then something like understanding as his gaze flickered to Ethan beside me and down to my hand where my engagement ring glittered. I didn't smile. I didn't glare. I simply held his gaze steadily, letting him see that I was here, that I was whole, that I was loved. After what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, Daniel looked away, his attention drawn back to the ceremony as the bridal march began. But in that brief moment of eye contact, I had said everything I needed to say without a single word. Beside me, Ethan squeezed my hand. "You okay?" he whispered. I nodded, surprised to find that I truly was. Perfect. We stayed for the ceremony, watching as Daniel and Melissa exchanged vows. I felt oddly detached from it all, as if I were watching strangers rather than the man who had once been the center of my world. When they were pronounced husband and wife, I felt nothing but a slight sense of relief. It was really over now, in every possible way. As the newlyweds processed back down the aisle, Daniel's eyes found me again. This time I allowed myself the smallest of smiles. Not mocking, not triumphant, but peaceful. Acknowledgement of the end of our story. We slipped out during the confusion of the recessional, before anyone could approach us or question our presence. Outside in the sunlight, Ethan pulled me into his arms. "How do you feel?" he asked, searching my face. I thought about it for a moment, taking stock of my emotions. The anger that had driven me for so long was gone, replaced by something lighter, something like freedom. "I feel finished," I said finally. "Like I've closed a book I've been trying to finish for a very long time." Ethan smiled, touching his forehead to mine. "I'm proud of you, you know." "That took courage." "I couldn't have done it without you," I admitted. "Not just today, but all of it. Healing. Learning to trust again. Learning to believe I was worthy of love. You were always worthy," he said softly. "You just needed to find someone who could see it." As we walked hand in hand back to our car, leaving Daniel's wedding behind us, I thought about the long journey from that horrible night in our kitchen to this moment. About the depths of despair I'd experienced, the slow climb back to myself, the unexpected joy of finding Ethan when I least expected it. Daniel had been wrong. Someone did love me, someone far better than he had ever been. And in proving him wrong, I had finally set myself free. "Where to now?" Ethan asked as we reached the car. I smiled, thinking of all the possibilities that lay ahead of us. Our apartment hunting, our wedding planning, our future together. "Anywhere," I said, "as long as it's with you." 2 years after Daniel told me no one would ever love me, I walked into his wedding with my fiancé by my side. Not out of bitterness or a desire to hurt him, but to show myself that I had survived, that I had thrived. And as Ethan and I drove away from St. James Church that day, planning our own future, I knew that the best revenge wasn't about making someone else miserable. The best revenge was claiming your own happiness on your own terms with someone who truly sees your worth. That's what I did, and I've never looked back since. The drive home from St. James Church was quiet, but not uncomfortably so. It was the peaceful silence of two people who understood each other deeply, who didn't need to fill every moment with words. Ethan's hand rested on mine, his thumb occasionally brushing over my engagement ring as if to remind himself it was real. I gazed out the window, watching the city pass by in a blur of spring colors, feeling strangely light, as if a weight I'd carried for so long had finally been lifted. "Hungry?" Ethan asked as we neared my neighborhood. I considered for a moment. "Starving, actually." He smiled. "Mario's?" I shook my head. "Too many memories from last night. Let's try that new place on Maple, the one with the rooftop garden." Perfect. We ended up spending the entire afternoon at that restaurant, lingering over lunch and then coffee and dessert, making plans for our future together. Not just our wedding, though we did start a list of ideas on Ethan's phone, but everything that would come after, where we wanted to live long term, whether we wanted children, how we'd balance our careers with our relationship. "I can't believe we're doing this," I said at one point, gesturing to the growing list of wedding venues on his screen. "Having second thoughts already?" Ethan teased, though I caught the flicker of genuine concern in his eyes. "No," I said firmly, reaching across the table to take his hand. "The opposite, actually. I can't believe how certain I am. How right this feels." The tension left his shoulders. "I know what you mean. It's like, when you know, you know." "Exactly," I agreed, smiling. Though I admit, a year ago, I would have rolled my eyes at anyone who said that to me. And now? Now I'm the one saying it. Funny how life works out. As the afternoon melted into evening, we finally paid our bill and headed back to my apartment. Our apartment, really, since Ethan spent most nights there already. Hemingway greeted us at the door with his usual enthusiasm, his whole body wiggling with joy. "Someone missed us." Ethan laughed, kneeling to ruffle the old dog's ears. I watched them together, this man and his dog who had become such essential parts of my life in such a relatively short time. The contrast between this homecoming and the cold emptiness of my apartment after Daniel left couldn't have been more stark. Later that night, as we lay in bed, Ethan propped up on one elbow looking down at me. He asked the question I'd been expecting all day. "Are you really okay? About today?" I took a moment to honestly assess my feelings. I am. Better than okay, actually. It was cathartic, I think is the word. Seeing Daniel, letting him see me, us, and then just leaving it all behind. No regrets about going? None, I said with certainty. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closing that chapter properly, on my terms. And now it's done. Ethan smiled, the relief evident in his expression. "I'm glad. I was a little worried it might bring up difficult feelings." "It did, in a way," I admitted, "but not in the way you might think. Watching Daniel get married didn't make me sad or jealous. It just made me grateful." Grateful? That things worked out the way they did. That he showed his true colors when he did instead of after we were married. That his cruelty led me to therapy, which helped me understand my own worth. I reached up to touch Ethan's face. That being single again meant I was available when this amazing literary agent bumped into me at a party. Ethan turned his head to kiss my palm. I've never been so grateful for my own clumsiness. We fell asleep tangled together, my head on his chest, his arms around me. For the first time in almost 2 years, I didn't dream of Daniel or that horrible night. I slept deeply, peacefully, and woke to sunlight streaming through the curtains and Ethan's gentle snoring beside me. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of engagement celebrations and wedding planning. Zoe insisted on throwing us an engagement party, which turned into a festive gathering of our closest friends and family at her apartment. Ethan's parents flew in from Seattle, eager to meet the woman who had captured their son's heart. They were warm, down-to-earth people who enveloped me in hugs within seconds of meeting me. "We've heard so much about you," Ethan's mom, Linda, said, holding both my hands in hers. "I haven't heard Ethan this happy in years. The feeling is mutual," I assured her, glancing over at where Ethan stood chatting with my parents, already looking completely at ease with them. My mother, ever the observant one, pulled me aside later in the evening. "He's the one, isn't he?" she asked quietly. I nodded, unable to stop the smile that spread across my face. "He is, Mom. He really is." She squeezed my hand. "I can see it in the way he looks at you, and the way you look at him." She hesitated, then added, "It's different than with Daniel." The mention of his name didn't sting as it once would have. "Everything is different with Ethan. It's equal, balanced. That's as it should be," my mother said with satisfaction. The party was a success, with our families blending seamlessly and our friends offering toasts that ranged from heartfelt to hilariously inappropriate, the latter mainly from Zoe after several glasses of champagne. As we thanked the last guests and helped Zoe clean up, I felt a profound sense of contentment. This was what happiness felt like. Not the desperate, clingy happiness I'd tried to maintain with Daniel, but something solid and real. Our wedding planning began in earnest after that. We decided on a fall wedding about 5 months away, not because we wanted to rush, but because we both loved autumn and couldn't imagine waiting a full year or more as was traditional. We found a beautiful venue, a renovated barn on the outskirts of the city, with exposed beams and twinkling lights strung throughout the rafters. We chose a simple, elegant theme that reflected both our tastes and kept the guest list to around 80 people, just those who truly mattered to us. 3 weeks after Daniel's wedding, as Ethan and I were poring over sample invitations at my dining table, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Curious, I opened it, then felt my blood freeze in my veins. "It was inappropriate for you to come to my wedding. We need to talk." "Daniel," I stared at the screen, a mix of emotions washing over me. Anger that he would reach out after all this time, indignation at his accusation, and beneath it all, a flicker of the old fear of confrontation, fear of his judgment. "What is it?" Ethan asked, noticing my expression. Wordlessly, I handed him my phone. His jaw tightened as he read the message, a protective fire lighting in his eyes. "You don't owe him a response," he said after a moment, "or a conversation." "I know," I said, taking the phone back and setting it face down on the table. "And I'm not going to give him either." I meant it in that moment. I had no intention of engaging with Daniel, of stepping back into the toxic dynamic we'd once shared. But later that night, after Ethan had fallen asleep, I found myself staring at that message again, the words seeming to taunt me from the screen. It would be so easy to ignore it, to delete the message and block the number. The Olivia of a year ago might have done exactly that, too afraid of conflict to stand her ground. But I wasn't that person anymore. Before I could overthink it, I typed a response. There was nothing inappropriate about attending a public ceremony in a place of worship. I came for closure, not to disrupt your day. There is nothing we need to discuss. Please don't contact me again. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then immediately blocked the number. My heart was pounding, but not from fear. From the rush of standing up for myself, of setting a boundary and enforcing it. It felt good, empowering. I didn't tell Ethan about the exchange immediately, not because I was hiding anything, but because it felt so inconsequential in the grand scheme of our life together. Daniel's attempt to pull me back into his orbit had failed. He had no power over me anymore. 2 days later, however, the issue resurfaced in an unexpected way. Ethan and I were shopping for wedding bands when my phone rang with a call from Zoe. "You will not believe who just tried to add me on LinkedIn," she said without preamble when I answered. "Who?" "Daniel freaking Collins." I stopped walking so abruptly that Ethan nearly crashed into me. "What? Why would he do that?" "That's exactly what I said. We barely spoke when you were together, and now, years later, he suddenly wants to connect professionally?" Zoe snorted. "Please. This has nothing to do with business networking." A sinking feeling settled in my stomach. He texted me. "After the wedding." "What?" Zoe's voice rose sharply. "When were you going to mention this?" "It didn't seem important," I said, aware of Ethan watching me with concern. "He said it was inappropriate for me to attend his wedding and that we needed to talk." I told him there was nothing to discuss and blocked his number. "And now he's trying to reach you through me," Zoe concluded. "What a creep. Did you accept the request?" "Hell no." I blocked him immediately. She paused, then added in a softer tone, "Are you okay, Liv? This must be bringing up stuff." I glanced at Ethan, who was now pretending to be very interested in a display of watches while clearly listening to every word. "I'm fine, actually. It's just annoying, like a mosquito buzzing around that I thought I'd already swatted. Want me to find out what his deal is? I still have some mutual connections who could—" "No," I interrupted firmly. "I don't want to know what his deal is. I don't want to give him any more space in my life or my head." After I hung up, Ethan stepped closer, his expression a mixture of concern and something that looked almost like pride. "You didn't tell me you responded to him," he said. "I did it after you were asleep." "It wasn't a big thing? I just set a boundary and blocked him?" I hesitated, then asked, "Are you upset I didn't mention it?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I'm actually impressed. The Olivia I met a year ago might have agonized over how to respond, or whether to respond at all. The Olivia you met a year ago was still learning how to stand up for herself." I acknowledged. "She's come a long way." He smiled, taking my hand. "She certainly has. Now let's get back to finding the perfect rings and forget about Daniel Collins." We did exactly that, selecting simple, matching bands that complemented my engagement ring. As we left the jewelry store hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of determination. I wouldn't let Daniel's pettiness taint this special time in my life. He'd already taken too much from me. He wouldn't take my joy in planning my wedding to Ethan. That resolve was tested a week later when I ran into Melissa at a coffee shop downtown. I had stopped in to grab a latte before a meeting with an author, and there she was, standing in line ahead of me. I recognized her immediately from the wedding, though we'd never officially met during my relationship with Daniel. For a moment, I considered slipping back out the door to avoid an awkward encounter. But then she turned, her eyes scanning the shop, and our gazes locked. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by something that looked like determination as she stepped out of line and approached me. "You're Olivia, right?" she asked, her voice surprisingly gentle. I nodded, bracing myself for whatever might come next. Accusations, anger, demands for an explanation of why I'd attended their wedding. Instead, she gave me a small, somewhat sad smile. "I thought so. I'm Melissa. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." Of all the things I had expected her to say, an apology wasn't even on the list. "Sorry for what?" I asked, genuinely confused. She glanced around the crowded coffee shop. "Can we sit for a minute?" Still bewildered, I nodded and followed her to a small table in the corner. As we sat down, I noticed she was twisting her wedding ring nervously, a gesture that humanized her in a way I hadn't expected. "I'm sorry for how things happened with Daniel," she said once we were seated. "I know there was overlap between your relationship and ours." "You mean he was cheating on me with you?" I said, not accusingly, just stating a fact. She winced slightly but nodded. "Yes. He told me you two were practically over, that it was just a matter of making it official." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. She looked down at her hands. "I didn't find out the full truth until much later. How long you'd been together." The way he ended things, I wasn't sure what to say. This conversation was so far outside anything I'd imagined that I felt like I was in some bizarre, alternate reality. "Why are you telling me this now?" I finally asked. "I saw you at the wedding," she admitted, "with your fiancé. You looked happy, at peace." It made me realize I've been carrying this guilt for a long time, and maybe I needed to apologize to move forward myself. The irony wasn't lost on me, that I had attended their wedding for closure, and here she was, seeking the same thing from me. "You don't owe me an apology, Melissa," I said after a moment. "Daniel was the one who made promises to me that he broke. You didn't know the full situation?" "Still," she insisted, "I should have asked more questions. Been more skeptical." She hesitated, then added, "Daniel was upset that you came to the wedding. He felt it was some kind of revenge move." I couldn't help the small laugh that escaped me. "It started that way," I admitted. "When I first found out about your engagement, I had this fantasy of showing up and making him see that he was wrong about me, that someone could love me." I shook my head at the memory of my initial vengeful plans. "But by the time your wedding actually happened, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closing that chapter of my life on my terms." Melissa studied me for a long moment, then nodded. "That makes sense. And for what it's worth, I'm glad you found someone who makes you happy." Her lips quirked into a small smile. "Your fiancé is very handsome. He's also kind," I said, unable to keep the warmth from my voice. "And honest. And supportive." Something flickered in her eyes. Doubt? Concern? It was gone too quickly for me to identify. "I should get back to work," she said, standing. "Thank you for talking with me." "Of course," I replied, still somewhat stunned by the entire interaction. As she turned to leave, she paused. "Just be prepared. Daniel might try to contact you again. He's been—" she seemed to search for the right word. "Fixated, I guess, on the fact that you came to the wedding. On your engagement." A chill ran down my spine. Why would he care about my engagement? She gave me another of those sad smiles. "Daniel doesn't like to lose, even things he's already thrown away." With that cryptic statement, she walked out of the coffee shop, leaving me staring after her in confusion. I relayed the bizarre encounter to Ethan that evening as we walked Hemingway through the park near our apartment. He listened intently, his brow furrowing more deeply as I recounted Melissa's warning. "So she came to apologize for being the other woman, then basically warned you that her new husband is obsessing over you," he summarized when I finished. "That's concerning on several levels, right?" I agreed, relieved that he found it as strange as I did. The whole conversation was surreal, and I can't figure out what she meant about Daniel not liking to lose things he's thrown away. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his hand warm in mine as we followed Hemingway's leisurely sniffing expedition along the path. "Some people," he said finally, "can only want what they can't have. They discard something, then become fixated on it the moment someone else values it. You think that's what's happening? That Daniel suddenly wants me back because I'm with you?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But it would explain why he's trying to contact you now, after all this time. Why he's so bothered by us attending his wedding." I shuddered at the thought. "Well, he can fixate all he wants. I'm exactly where I want to be." Ethan squeezed my hand. "Me too." Despite my brave words, Melissa's warning left me unsettled. Over the next few days, I found myself scanning crowds for Daniel's face, tensing whenever my phone rang with an unknown number. It was a familiar anxiety, one I thought I'd left behind. "This is ridiculous," I declared to Zoe over lunch the following week. "I'm letting him get in my head again, and I haven't even actually heard from him since that one text." "Maybe that's his game," Zoe suggested, stabbing viciously at her salad as if it had personally offended her. "To make you anxious, to disrupt your happiness without having to do much at all." I considered this possibility. "You might be right. And if so, the best response is to simply go on with my life and be happy, right?" "Exactly." Zoe pointed her fork at me for emphasis. "The best revenge is living well, remember? So keep planning your dream wedding to your dream man and forget Daniel even exists." I took her advice to heart. I threw myself back into wedding planning with renewed enthusiasm, refusing to let the shadow of Daniel's possible interference dampen my joy. Ethan and I finalized our invitations, booked a caterer, and began the process of finding the perfect dress for me and suit for him. It was during a dress fitting, with Zoe and my mother offering opinions on different styles, that I received the email. I didn't see it until after the appointment, when I checked my phone while we grabbed lunch nearby. From Daniel.Collins@collinstech.com. Subject: We need to clear the air. Olivia, I know you blocked my number, but I think we need to have an adult conversation about what happened between us and your inappropriate appearance at my wedding. It's clear you're still holding on to resentment, and I'd like to clear the air for both our sakes. I'll be at Riverside Cafe tomorrow at 2 p.m. I hope you'll meet me there so we can put the past behind us properly." Daniel, I stared at the screen, a mixture of disbelief and indignation washing over me. The audacity of this man to suggest that I was the one holding on to resentment, when he was the one who couldn't seem to let go. "What is it?" my mother asked, noticing my expression. "Bad news?" I hesitated, then handed her my phone. As she read the email, her face darkened with anger. My mother had always been polite to Daniel during our relationship, but after learning how he'd ended things, she'd made no secret of her disdain for him. "The nerve," she muttered, passing the phone to Zoe, who let out a string of curses that earned us disapproving looks from nearby diners. "You're not going, right?" Zoe demanded, once she'd finished expressing her opinion of Daniel in colorful language. "Of course not," I said, taking my phone back and deleting the email with a decisive tap. "I have nothing to say to him, and certainly nothing to hear." "Good," my mother said firmly. "That man doesn't deserve another moment of your time or energy." I agreed completely. And yet, as I tried on my final selection of wedding dresses later that afternoon, a tiny part of me wondered what Daniel wanted to say, what possible explanation he could have for his behavior, both during our breakup and now. It wasn't that I was considering meeting him, I absolutely was not, but the curiosity lingered like a small stone in my shoe. When I told Ethan about the email that evening, his reaction was calm but resolute. "If you wanted to meet him, to get whatever closure you still need, I would understand," he said, surprising me. "But I'd want to be there with you." "I don't want to meet him," I assured him. "There's nothing he could say that would change anything." Ethan nodded, visibly relieved. "I think that's the right call. But if you change your mind..." "I won't," I interrupted, then softened my tone. "But thank you for being supportive either way." The next day, at 2:15 p.m., my phone pinged with another email from Daniel. From Daniel.Collins@collinstech.com. Subject, we need to clear the air, I'm sitting here waiting for you. I thought you'd have the courtesy to at least show up after everything we meant to each other. I guess your new fiancé has changed you more than I realized. I read it once, then deleted it without responding. 15 minutes later, another email arrived. From Daniel.Collins@collinstech.com. Subject, we need to clear the air, fine. Have it your way. But you should know that crashing my wedding was a childish, desperate move that only made you look pathetic. If you think you've somehow won by getting engaged to the first guy who showed interest after me, you're deluding yourself. We both know it won't last. I deleted this one too, but not before taking a screenshot to show Ethan later. The petty, vindictive tone confirmed that I'd made the right decision in not meeting him. Whatever clearing the air he had in mind clearly had nothing to do with sincere apologies or genuine closure. When Ethan saw the screenshot that evening, his usual calm demeanor gave way to a flash of genuine anger. "This is harassment," he said, his voice tight. "He's trying to hurt you because his ego can't handle the fact that you've moved on." "I know," I agreed. "But it's not working. His words don't have power over me anymore." And it was true. Reading Daniel's spiteful message had provoked annoyance rather than pain. The man who had once been able to shatter my self-worth with a few cruel words now seemed small and pathetic, lashing out from a place of insecurity. "Still," Ethan insisted, "this isn't okay. Do you want me to contact him? Tell him to back off?" I shook my head. That would only feed into whatever narrative he's created where I'm still hung up on him. "The best response is no response," Ethan reluctantly agreed, though I could tell he was still bothered by Daniel's behavior. Later that night, as we lay in bed discussing final details for our wedding invitations, he suddenly asked, "Does it bother you that we're getting married so quickly? That people might think what Daniel implied, that you're rushing into this on the rebound?" The question caught me off guard. "Where is this coming from?" "I don't know," he admitted, staring up at the ceiling. I guess his email got to me more than I thought. Made me worry that maybe we are moving fast, and maybe people will judge that. I propped myself up on one elbow to look down at him. "First of all, we've been together for a year. That's not exactly a whirlwind romance. Second, I couldn't care less what people think, especially if one of those people is Daniel Collins." Ethan's eyes met mine, uncertainty still lingering in them. "You're sure? Because we could postpone, do a longer engagement if—" "Ethan Reed," I interrupted, placing my hand on his chest, feeling his heartbeat under my palm. "I want to marry you. Not a year from now, not 5 years from now. This fall, just like we planned. I've never been more certain of anything in my life." The doubt in his eyes cleared, replaced by that warm look that never failed to make my heart skip. "I want that too, more than anything." "Then let's not let Daniel or anyone else make us question what we know is right for us," I said, leaning down to kiss him. The next morning, I woke up to find Ethan already awake and typing on his laptop at the kitchen table, Hemingway dozing at his feet. "Early start?" I asked, pouring myself a cup of the coffee he'd already made. He looked up with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd get some work done." I sat beside him, noticing the tension in his shoulders. "Is everything okay?" He hesitated, then closed his laptop. I did something I probably shouldn't have. A flutter of anxiety stirred in my stomach. "What?" I emailed Daniel. I nearly spilled my coffee. "You what? Why? When?" "Last night after you fell asleep." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as a sign of his discomfort. "His messages to you were out of line, Liv. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. So I wrote him a very direct email asking him to stop contacting you." "Oh, Ethan." I sighed, not sure whether to be touched by his protectiveness or frustrated by his intervention. "What exactly did you say?" "Nothing threatening," he assured me quickly. "Just that you've moved on, that you're happy, and that his attempts to disrupt that happiness are unwelcome." I told him any further contact would be considered harassment. I took a long sip of my coffee, processing this information. "Has he responded?" "Not yet." Ethan looked genuinely contrite. "I'm sorry, Liv. I know you wanted to handle this by ignoring him, but the thought of him sending you more emails like that, trying to undermine your confidence or our relationship, I couldn't just do nothing." As much as I wanted to be annoyed that he'd gone against my wishes, I understood his reaction. If someone had been sending Ethan cruel, manipulative messages, I would have been equally protective. "It's okay," I said finally. "I appreciate that you wanted to defend me. Just, next time, let's make these decisions together, all right?" "Absolutely." He agreed, relief evident in his expression. I promise. To our surprise, Daniel didn't respond to Ethan's email, nor did he send any further messages to me. For a brief, hopeful moment, I thought perhaps he had finally decided to leave us alone. Then, 3 days later, I received a text from a number I didn't recognize. Olivia, it's Melissa. Can we meet? It's important. Please don't tell Daniel I contacted you. I stared at the message, a sense of foreboding washing over me. Why would Daniel's wife want to meet with me again? And why the secrecy? After some deliberation, I responded with a simple, when and where. We arranged to meet at a small bookstore cafe across town, a place I was confident Daniel would never frequent. I decided not to tell Ethan about the meeting beforehand, not out of secrecy, but because I wanted to hear what Melissa had to say without any preconceptions or protective intervention. The afternoon of our meeting was rainy, the kind of sudden summer downpour that turns the city streets into rushing rivers. I arrived at the cafe damp despite my umbrella, to find Melissa already seated in a corner booth, a steaming mug between her hands. Thank you for coming, she said as I slid into the seat across from her, shaking water from my hair. Especially in this weather. Your message sounded urgent, I replied, studying her face. She looked tired, with faint shadows under her eyes that her carefully applied makeup couldn't quite conceal. Is everything okay? She gave a small, humorless laugh. Not really, no. She took a deep breath as if gathering courage. Daniel has become obsessed with you, with your engagement, with proving that you're still in love with him. I blinked, taken aback by her bluntness. I don't even know what to say to that. I haven't been in love with Daniel for a very long time. I know that, she said, surprising me again. But Daniel has convinced himself that your appearance at our wedding was a desperate attempt to get his attention, to show him what he was missing. That's ridiculous, I protested. I'm happily engaged to someone else, someone much better for me than Daniel ever was. She nodded, twisting her wedding ring just as she had during our first meeting. I know, I can see that. But Daniel, he's always been good at creating narratives that make him the hero, or at least the prize everyone wants. And in his version of reality, you're still pining for him, using this new relationship to try to make him jealous. I shook my head in disbelief. Why are you telling me this, Melissa? What do you want me to do about Daniel's delusions? She leaned forward, lowering her voice even though no one was seated near us. I want you to be careful. Daniel can be vindictive when his ego is wounded. And your fiancé's email, you know about that? I interrupted, surprised. Daniel showed it to me. He was furious. He saw it as proof that you had told your fiancé about our history, that you were still talking about him, still affected by him. I fought the urge to laugh at the sheer absurdity of Daniel's logic. So let me get this straight. Daniel thinks I'm still in love with him, but also that I've poisoned my fiancé against him? That makes no sense. I didn't say his thinking was rational, Melissa replied with a hint of weariness that suggested this wasn't the first time she'd dealt with Daniel's twisted logic. I just wanted to warn you, to be on your guard. Against what exactly? I asked, a chill running through me despite the cafe's warmth. Do you think Daniel would actually do something harmful? She hesitated, her fingers tightening around her mug. Not physically, no. But he's been talking about reaching out to your work, suggesting that your relationship with your fiancé might be inappropriate since he's a literary agent and you're an editor. What? I gasped, genuine anger flaring inside me. That's completely baseless. Ethan and I maintain absolute professional boundaries. His agency rarely even works with my publishing house. I know, Melissa said quickly. I told him it was a terrible idea, that it could backfire and damage his own reputation. I think I talked him out of it, but she trailed off, leaving the implied threat hanging between us. Why are you really here, Melissa? I asked, suddenly suspicious. Are you trying to warn me, or are you delivering a message from Daniel? Some kind of threat to try to keep me away from him? Her eyes widened in surprise. No, God, no. I'm here because... She took a deep breath. Because I'm starting to see sides of Daniel that concern me. The way he's fixated on you, the stories he tells himself, the anger when reality doesn't match his narrative. It's making me question things. The vulnerability in her admission caught me off guard. I'd expected many things from this meeting, but Melissa confiding her own doubts about her new husband wasn't one of them. I'm sorry, I said, genuinely meaning it. That must be difficult, especially so early in your marriage. She gave me a sad smile. You know, when Daniel and I first got together, he told me all about his clingy ex who couldn't accept that the relationship was over, who was emotionally unstable and dependent on him. She shook her head. Meeting you, seeing how together and happy you are, makes me realize none of that was true. It makes me wonder what else he's lied about. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. Here was the woman Daniel had left me for, questioning her own relationship while I had finally found true happiness. "What are you going to do?" I asked, not sure if I was referring to her marriage or the immediate situation with Daniel's threats. For now, I'm going to try to keep Daniel focused on other things. His work, our new house, anything but you and your engagement. She met my eyes directly. But you should know that I won't participate in any schemes to hurt you or your fiancé. And if Daniel persists with these ideas of professional sabotage, I'll warn you. Thank you, I said, slightly overwhelmed by this unexpected alliance. That's very decent of you. As our meeting came to an end, Melissa reached across the table to touch my hand briefly. Be happy, Olivia. You deserve that. So do you, I replied, meaning it despite everything. Whatever her role in the dissolution of my relationship with Daniel, Melissa seemed like a woman caught in the same web of manipulation that had once entangled me. I told Ethan about the meeting as soon as I got home, recounting every detail of Melissa's warnings and confessions. He listened intently, his expression growing more troubled as I spoke. "This is beyond petty jealousy," he said when I finished. "This is disturbing behavior. If he's really considering trying to interfere with our careers, Melissa thinks she talked him out of it," I reminded him. "And even if she didn't, any allegations would be baseless. We've done nothing wrong." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture I now recognized as a sign of his frustration. Still, accusations alone can sometimes cause damage, even when they're unfounded, especially in industries as relationship-driven as ours. "What should we do?" I asked, the anxiety I thought I'd left behind creeping back into my chest. "Go to HR preemptively? Get a lawyer? Let's not panic yet," Ethan said, pulling me into his arms. "For now, we document everything. Save Daniel's emails, your texts with Melissa, anything that shows his behavior and intentions. If he does try something, we'll be prepared." I nodded against his chest, drawing comfort from his steady heartbeat. I hate that he's still finding ways to affect our lives, that he's tainting our engagement with this drama. He only has that power if we give it to him. Ethan reminded me gently. We can choose to focus on our future instead. He was right, of course. And in the weeks that followed, that's exactly what we tried to do. We sent out our wedding invitations, secured a florist, and found the perfect cake topped with miniature versions of us and Hemingway. Ethan's lease ended, and he officially moved the last of his things into my apartment, which was now undeniably ours. We settled into a rhythm of shared mornings and evenings that felt so natural, it was hard to remember a time when we hadn't lived together. Daniel, meanwhile, remained ominously silent. No more emails, no more attempts to contact me through friends. Even Melissa hadn't reached out again after our cafe meeting. I wanted to believe he had finally moved on, focused on his own marriage and life, but the silence felt almost too complete, too sudden. Maybe Melissa really did get through to him, Zoe suggested optimistically when I shared my concerns over brunch. Or maybe he realized how pathetic he was being and got some much-needed therapy. Maybe, I agreed, though doubt lingered. Daniel had never been one to simply let things go, especially when his ego was involved. My suspicions were confirmed a month before our wedding, when I was called into my boss's office one Monday morning. Catherine, the publishing director who had been my mentor since I started at the company, looked uncharacteristically serious as I took a seat across from her desk. "Olivia," she began, clearly uncomfortable, "I received an unusual email over the weekend from someone named Daniel Collins. He claims to be your ex-partner." My stomach dropped. "What did he want?" Catherine sighed, removing her glasses to rub the bridge of her nose. "He implied that your relationship with Ethan Reed might constitute a conflict of interest, given your respective positions. He suggested that manuscripts from Hayes Literary might be receiving preferential treatment." Despite expecting something like this after Melissa's warning, hearing that Daniel had actually gone through with his threats made my blood boil. "That's absolutely false," I said firmly. "Ethan and I have been scrupulous about maintaining professional boundaries. In the past year, I've only edited one manuscript from Hayes, and that project was assigned to me before Ethan and I even met." "I know," Catherine said, surprising me. "I checked our records immediately after receiving his email. There's no evidence of any impropriety whatsoever." Relief washed over me. So you don't believe him? Not for a moment, she assured me. Even if I didn't know you to be a person of integrity, the email itself was revealing. It read like a personal vendetta, not a genuine professional concern. She hesitated, then added, "He mentioned your upcoming wedding, said it was rushed, and suggested it might be airbound situation." Anger flared inside me, hot and fierce. That has absolutely nothing to do with any professional matters. He's just trying to hurt me because he can't accept that I've moved on. That was my assessment as well, Catherine agreed. I've already deleted the email and had IT block his address from our servers. I only wanted to make you aware in case he tries to approach other colleagues with these allegations. Thank you, I said, grateful for her trust and support. I'm sorry you had to deal with this at all. Don't apologize for someone else's bad behavior, she replied firmly. Just keep doing the excellent work you've always done. I left her office feeling a mix of emotions: relief that Catherine had seen through Daniel's tactics, anger that he had followed through on his threats, and a renewed determination not to let him disrupt my life or career. When I told Ethan about the meeting that evening, his reaction was even more severe than I had anticipated. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw him truly angry, not just annoyed or frustrated, but deeply, intensely furious. "This crosses a line," he said, pacing our living room while Hemingway watched anxiously from his bed. "Trying to damage your professional reputation, your career. This is beyond petty jealousy or wounded pride." Catherine didn't believe him. I reminded him, trying to calm his anger. She saw right through it. This time, Ethan said grimly, "But who knows what else he might try? If he's willing to go to your workplace, what's next? Your family? Our wedding vendors?" The thought sent a chill through me. I hadn't considered that Daniel might try to interfere with our actual wedding plans. "We need to do something proactive," Ethan continued. "Set a boundary he can't ignore." "Like what?" I asked, concerned by the determined glint in his eye. "Ethan, promise me you won't do anything rash." He stopped pacing, his expression softening as he looked at me. "I won't, but I think we should consider legal options. A cease and desist letter at minimum. What he's doing could potentially be considered harassment or defamation." The idea of involving lawyers felt extreme, but then again, so did Daniel's behavior. "Let me think about it," I said finally. "If he does anything else, we'll definitely take legal action. But for now, maybe we should focus on making sure our wedding is secure." Ethan nodded reluctantly. "All right. But I'm calling all our vendors tomorrow to make sure they know not to accept any changes or cancellations unless they come directly from both of us, with our agreed-upon password." "We have a wedding password?" I asked, momentarily distracted from my worry. A small smile finally broke through his anger. "We do now. How about Hemingway?" That made me laugh, releasing some of the tension that had built up inside me. Perfect. No one would ever guess that. We spent the rest of the evening calling and emailing our wedding vendors, explaining that due to a personal situation, we didn't elaborate, we needed to add an extra security measure to our account. Every vendor was understanding and agreed to require our password for any changes to our arrangements. The next day, I received a text from Melissa. I heard what Daniel did. "I'm so sorry. I tried to stop him, but he waited until I was visiting my parents this weekend. We had a huge fight when I found out. I don't know what's going to happen with us, but I wanted you to know I had nothing to do with it." I believed her. The Melissa I had met seemed genuinely regretful about her role in my past pain and unlikely to participate in causing me more. I replied with a simple thank you for letting me know, not wanting to get drawn into the details of her marital problems, but appreciating her integrity in reaching out. The following weeks passed in a blur of final wedding preparations and heightened vigilance. We changed the passwords on all our accounts, asked friends to keep an eye out for any unusual contacts from Daniel, and I even had a security company do a sweep of our apartment after Ethan became concerned that Daniel might have somehow obtained a key during the time he lived there with me. The precautions felt extreme, but they also gave us peace of mind, and as our wedding day approached with no further incidents, I began to hope that perhaps Daniel had finally gotten the message, or that Melissa had somehow managed to rein him in. 1 week before our wedding, as Ethan and I were finalizing the seating chart for our reception, my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but we were waiting to hear from our photographer about a last-minute schedule change, so I answered. "Hello? Olivia." Daniel's voice, so familiar yet now so unwelcome, sent a jolt of adrenaline through me. "Don't hang up, please," I gestured frantically to Ethan, mouthing, "It's Daniel!" As I put the phone on speaker. Ethan's face hardened, but he nodded for me to continue the conversation while he quickly retrieved his own phone, presumably to record. "What do you want, Daniel?" I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as possible. "To apologize," he said, the words so unexpected that for a moment I thought I'd misheard. "I've been acting irrationally." I exchanged a skeptical look with Ethan. "Why now?" A heavy sigh came through the line. "Melissa left me. Said she couldn't be with someone who was still so hung up on his ex that he'd try to sabotage her career. Said it made her question everything about our relationship." I felt a surprising twinge of sympathy for Melissa, who had clearly come to the same realization about Daniel that had taken me years to see. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said carefully, "but it doesn't explain why you're calling me. I wanted to tell you that I'm backing off. Completely. I've been seeing a therapist, trying to understand why I reacted so extremely to seeing you at the wedding, to learning about your engagement." Another sigh. "It wasn't healthy what I did." "I know that now." Ethan's expression was deeply skeptical, mirroring my own doubt. Daniel had never been one for self-reflection or admitting fault. "I appreciate the apology," I said, choosing my words deliberately, "but I need you to understand something. You and I are done. Not just romantically, but in every way. I don't want your apologies, your explanations, or any contact at all. I want you to respect my boundaries and stay completely out of my life." There was a long pause. When Daniel spoke again, his voice had a tightness to it that I recognized as suppressed anger. "I'm trying to do the right thing here, Olivia. To be mature about this." "The right thing," I replied evenly, "would be to have never contacted my workplace with false allegations, to have never tried to interfere in my relationship, to have treated me with basic respect when we broke up instead of telling me no one would ever love me." Another pause, longer this time. "I never said that." The blatant lie made my blood boil. "Yes, you did. Those exact words, Daniel. No one will ever love you. And then you laughed." "You're misremembering," he insisted, his voice taking on the patronizing tone I now realized had been a constant throughout our relationship. "I would never say something so cruel." Ethan's free hand clenched into a fist, his knuckles white with anger as he listened to Daniel's gaslighting. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that Daniel no longer had the power to make me doubt my own memories or perceptions. "This conversation is over," I said firmly. "Don't call me again. Don't contact my workplace. Don't interfere in my life in any way. If you do, we will take legal action. Is that clear?" "You're being unreasonable," Daniel said, his facade of contrition giving way to the petulance I remembered so well. "I'm trying to make amends and you're—" I ended the call, cutting him off mid-sentence. Then, with Ethan watching, I blocked the number. "You okay?" Ethan asked softly, setting down his phone and moving to wrap his arms around me. I leaned into his embrace, considering the question. "Yes," I said, realizing it was true. "Actually, I think I needed that. To hear him lie so blatantly about what he said to me, to try to make me doubt my own memories, it reminded me of why I'm so much better off without him." Ethan kissed the top of my head. "He can't rewrite your history, and he definitely can't change your future." "Our future," I corrected, smiling up at him. "Our future," he agreed, returning my smile with one of his own, "which begins officially in 1 week. The night before our wedding, we broke with tradition and spent it together in our apartment. We'd decided against separate bachelor and bachelorette parties, instead having a joint celebration with our closest friends 2 weeks earlier. Now we wanted nothing more than a quiet evening together before the excitement of the next day." "Nervous?" Ethan asked as we sat on our balcony, sharing a bottle of wine and watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. "Not about marrying you," I replied honestly. "A little about tripping as I walked down the aisle, or forgetting my vows, or any of the million small things that could go wrong tomorrow." He laughed, the sound warm and reassuring. "If any of those things happen, we'll laugh about it and move on. The only thing that really matters is that at the end of the day, we'll be married." I took his hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit with mine, how natural it felt to be sitting here with him on the eve of our wedding. How far I had come from that broken woman crying on her couch, believing she was unlovable. "I never thought I'd be here," I admitted softly. After what happened with Daniel, the things he said, part of me believed him. That I was too ordinary, too boring for anyone to truly love. Ethan's expression grew serious. "You know that was never true, right? Not for a single moment." "I know that now," I assured him. "But it took time. And therapy. And you, showing me every day what real love looks like." He brought my hand to his lips, kissing my knuckles gently. "You showed me too, you know, what it means to be truly seen and accepted, to build a partnership based on mutual respect and understanding." As we sat there talking quietly about our hopes for the wedding day and our life beyond it, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Whatever lingering anxiety I had about Daniel potentially disrupting our wedding had faded. He had no power here, in this space we had created together, filled with love and trust and the simple joy of being ourselves with each other. Our wedding day dawned clear and crisp, the perfect fall day we had hoped for. I got ready at our apartment with Zoe, my mother, and Ethan's mother, while Ethan and the groomsmen prepared at his best friend's place nearby. Despite the traditional separation for the morning, we still texted constantly, little messages of excitement and love that kept us connected even when apart. "The flowers just arrived and they're perfect." I texted him around noon. "Hemingway is being very dignified in his bow tie," he replied, attaching a photo of our elderly dog looking surprisingly distinguished in his wedding attire. As I slipped into my wedding dress, a simple, elegant gown with delicate lace detailing that made me feel both beautiful and completely myself, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The heartbreak that had felt so devastating at the time now seemed like a necessary turning point, redirecting me toward the happiness I deserved. "You look radiant," my mother said, tears in her eyes as she fastened the last button on my dress. "Truly, truly beautiful." Zoe, never one for sentimentality, was blinking back tears of her own. "Daniel Collins is going to eat his heart out when he sees the photos of what he missed out on," she declared, making us all laugh. "I'd rather not think about him today," I replied, smiling at my reflection in the mirror. "This day isn't about him or what happened in the past. It's about Ethan and me and our future." "That's my girl," my mother said proudly. The ceremony was scheduled for 4 p.m., timed to coincide with the golden hour, when the sunlight would be warm and perfect for photos. As we arrived at the venue, our beautifully decorated barn with fairy lights twinkling from every beam, I felt a surge of emotion so powerful it momentarily took my breath away. This was really happening. I was about to marry the man I loved, surrounded by the people who mattered most to us. "Ready?" my father asked as he took his place beside me at the back of the aisle, offering his arm. I nodded, unable to speak through the lump of happy tears in my throat. The music began, not the traditional wedding march, but a beautiful acoustic version of the song that had been playing the first night Ethan and I admitted we loved each other. As the doors opened and I saw him standing at the end of the aisle, his face lighting up at the sight of me, everything else fell away. The guests, the decorations, even the anxieties of the past few weeks, all of it disappeared, leaving only Ethan and me and the palpable love between us. I walked toward him, my eyes never leaving his, barely aware of the smiling faces turning to watch my progress. When I reached him and my father placed my hand in his, Ethan leaned in to whisper, "You take my breath away." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion and joy. We had written our own vows, simple but heartfelt promises to support each other, to communicate honestly, to choose each other every day. As we exchanged rings, the simple bands we had selected together months before, I felt a sense of rightness so profound it brought fresh tears to my eyes. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the officiant declared, beaming at us. "You may kiss the bride." Ethan cradled my face in his hands with such tenderness it made my heart ache, then kissed me as our friends and family erupted in cheers and applause. As we turned to face our guests, hand in hand, I saw nothing but love and support on the faces surrounding us. This, I realized, was what it meant to be truly happy, to be surrounded by people who genuinely wished for your happiness, who celebrated your joy as their own. The reception that followed was everything we had hoped for, intimate, joyful, and completely us. We danced our first dance to a slow, sweet song about finding home in each other's arms. We cut our cake, laughing as Hemingway, supervised by Ethan's brother, tried his best to look dignified while clearly hoping for a fallen crumb. We mingled with our guests, accepting congratulations and well wishes with genuine gratitude. As the evening progressed and the dancing grew more enthusiastic, aided no doubt by the excellent wine we had selected, Ethan pulled me aside to a quiet corner of the venue. "Happy?" he asked, his arms around my waist, his eyes reflecting the twinkling lights above us. "Impossibly so," I replied, reaching up to touch his face, still somewhat amazed that this wonderful man was now my husband. Everything is perfect. There's something I've been wanting to tell you all day, he said, a hint of nervousness in his voice. I was going to wait until we were alone tonight, but I don't think I can hold it in any longer. What is it? I asked, suddenly concerned by his serious tone. I got a call yesterday from my boss. The head of Hayes Literary wants to open a London office, and they've asked me to run it. His eyes searched mine, gauging my reaction. It would mean moving, obviously. Starting over in a new city. I told them I needed to discuss it with my wife. The word wife made him smile, as if he couldn't quite believe he got to use it. I know your job at North Star is important to you, and I would completely understand if— Yes, I interrupted, surprising myself with the immediacy of my response. Let's do it. Let's move to London. Ethan blinked, clearly not expecting such quick enthusiasm. Are you sure? What about your career, your friends, your family? I thought about it for a moment, but my initial instinct didn't waver. My career is portable. Good editors are needed everywhere, and North Star even has a UK division I could potentially transfer to. As for friends and family, they'll visit. We'll visit. It's London, not Mars. But it's a big change, he persisted. A new country, a new start. A new start. I repeated, the words resonating deeply. That's exactly why I want to do it. Think about it, Ethan. A completely fresh beginning for us, somewhere neither of us has history. Somewhere I don't have to worry about running into Daniel or dealing with any lingering ghosts from my past. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You're sure? This isn't just about escaping Daniel or bad memories. It's about embracing an amazing opportunity for you, for us, I clarified. The fact that it also gives us a clean slate is just a bonus. He searched my face for a moment longer, then broke into a radiant smile. London it is then. A new adventure for Mr. and Mrs. Reed. The first of many, I promised, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. As we rejoined our reception, now with this exciting secret shared between us, I felt a sense of closure more profound than anything I had experienced before. The chapter of my life that included Daniel Collins was truly, definitively over. Ahead lay a future filled with possibilities I couldn't even imagine yet, all of them to be discovered with Ethan by my side. Later that night, as we danced one last dance before departing for our honeymoon suite, I caught sight of our reflection in one of the venue's large windows. We were wrapped in each other's arms, my head resting on Ethan's shoulder, both of us smiling with the kind of deep, quiet joy that comes from true contentment. In that moment, I thought of Daniel's cruel words from 2 years ago, "No one will ever love you," and felt nothing but pity for him. How little he had understood about real love, about partnership, about the joy of finding someone who sees and cherishes your authentic self. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan murmured against my hair, sensing my momentary distraction. "About how glad I am that you bumped into me at that party," I replied, choosing to focus on the beginning of our story rather than the end of my previous one. "About how lucky I am that you spilled my wine." He laughed softly. "I've never been so grateful for my own clumsiness." As the evening came to a close and we said our goodbyes, heading off to begin our honeymoon and the first days of our married life, I felt no lingering sadness, no unresolved anger, no need for further vindication. Daniel had been wrong about me, wrong about love, wrong about everything that mattered. And in proving him wrong, I had found not just revenge, but redemption. Not just closure, but a new beginning far more beautiful than anything I could have imagined during those dark days after our breakup. 2 years after Daniel told me no one would ever love me, I married a man who loved me completely, authentically, and without reservation. A man who never made me question my worth or feel grateful for his attention. A man who saw my strength even when I couldn't see it myself. And as Ethan and I drove away from our wedding reception, hands intertwined, wedding bands glinting in the moonlight, I knew with absolute certainty that love, real, enduring love, had been waiting for me all along. I just had to be brave enough to believe I deserved it.